My name is Jack, Sergeant Jack, though no one calls me Sergeant anymore. Not for a long time. I am 60 years old, and the city of Dallas has been my home for most of those years, especially after I left the service. Every morning I woke up before the sun, the same ache in my knees, the same stiffness in my shoulders, a constant reminder of battles fought long ago and the hard work of living since. I used to feel the sun warm on my face as I walked to my construction job, building up this city block by block. Now the sun just felt like another thing I had to face, another day to get through. My apartment was small, just a bedroom and a tiny kitchen, but it was mine, a sanctuary filled with old photos of my unit, a worn flag, and the quiet hum of a life lived mostly alone. My big dream, the one I kept tucked away like an old letter, was just to have a small patch of green, a garden where I could grow something, anything, from the earth. To feel connected to something living. But dreams like that felt far away when the reality of life pressed in. The truth was, things had been hard for a while. My construction job dried up when the big projects finished, and at my age, finding new work felt like pushing a boulder uphill. The medical bills from an old injury flared up, requiring more trips to the doctor than I could afford. My savings, which I had carefully built over decades, were slowly being eaten away, like sand slipping through my fingers. I tried to stretch every dollar, cooking simple meals, mending my own clothes, walking everywhere to save on gas. But the numbers never seemed to add up. The real enemy, though, wasn't just the shrinking bank account or the growing stack of bills. It was the voice in my head, my internal nemesis, telling me that I was on my own, that I should be able to handle this. It was the stubborn pride that had served me well in the military, but now whispered that asking for help was a weakness, a sign that I had failed. I was a sergeant, a leader, not someone who needed charity. I told myself that men like me didn't burden others. So I kept my struggles to myself, a silent battle fought in the quiet of my small apartment, the weight of the world pressing down. I spent weeks looking for work, knocking on doors, filling out applications online even though my old hands weren't quick on a keyboard. I took a part-time job stocking shelves at a grocery store at night, lifting heavy boxes, my body protesting with every movement. The pay was barely enough to cover rent and a few groceries, but I held on to it with everything I had. One evening, after a particularly long shift, I saw an elderly woman struggling to carry her bags to her car. Without thinking, I offered to help, carrying them for her, walking her all the way to her front door, a quiet satisfaction in doing something good. Maybe I thought if I just kept my head down, kept working, kept helping others, things would turn around. But the universe had other plans. My landlord, a kind but firm man, gave me notice. They were selling the building. I had 60 days to find a new place. 60 days. Dallas rent was sky high, and with my dwindling income, every apartment seemed out of reach. I looked at cheaper places, even rooming houses, but the thought of losing my small sanctuary, my last bit of stability, filled me with a cold dread. Then, as if things weren't bad enough, my old pickup truck, the one I'd had for 20 years and relied on for my grocery store job, finally gave out. A loud bang, a puff of smoke, and that was it. The repair estimate was more than the truck was worth. Without it, getting to my job became a 3-bus ordeal, adding hours to my already long days. I started missing shifts, too tired, too defeated. The manager had to let me go. I was out of a job, out of time, and soon to be out of a home. I spent a night in my truck, parked in a quiet corner of a public parking lot, staring out at the Dallas skyline, the city lights mocking my darkness. I was 60 years old, a veteran, and I was about to be homeless. The voice in my head screamed that I was a failure, that I had fought for my country only to be forgotten by it. Giving up felt like the only option left. I closed my eyes, wishing I could just disappear. The next morning, I drove my broken truck to a park, just needing a place to sit, to clear my head, to figure out what little dignity I had left. I watched children playing on the swings, their laughter a stark contrast to the emptiness inside me. A school bus pulled up, and a line of elementary school kids spilled out, heading towards the picnic tables with their teachers. They were on a field trip, it seemed. One of the teachers handed out paper and crayons, explaining that they were drawing pictures for local heroes. I watched them, their earnest faces scrunched in concentration. After a while, a little girl, no older than 8 or 9, walked over to me, her bright eyes wide. She held out a piece of paper. "This is for you," she said shyly. I took it, my calloused fingers trembling slightly. It was a crayon drawing of a man in an old-fashioned army uniform, a flag waving behind him and a bright, shining star on his chest. In shaky, childlike letters, she had scrawled, "To our hero, SGT, Jack, thank you for being brave." My name. How did she know my name? I looked down at the drawing, then back at her. She pointed to a small, faded SGT. Jack embroidered on my old military jacket, a habit I'd never lost, wearing it on chilly mornings. The pure, unquestioning belief in that child's eyes, the simple words, the drawing of a hero, it cracked something open inside me that had been locked away for decades. The internal nemesis, the voice of pride and isolation, suddenly sounded hollow, small. This child, this complete stranger, saw a hero, not a burden, not a failure. In that moment, surrounded by the innocence of the park, I felt a flicker of warmth, a spark of hope. I had to reach out. I had to. I thanked the little girl, my voice thick with emotion, and she skipped back to her friends. I took out my old flip phone, my hand still shaking. I remembered seeing a flyer for veteran services at the community center once. I dialed the number, my heart pounding, fully expecting a recording. Instead, a kind voice answered. "Veterans Outreach, how can I help you?" I told them everything, the words tumbling out, the story of my job loss, my truck, the eviction notice, the shame, and finally the drawing. The woman on the other end listened patiently. She didn't judge. She just listened. Within days, she had connected me with a local veterans organization that specialized in emergency housing and financial assistance. They helped me find a temporary room, then a small, affordable apartment, much smaller than my old one, but it had a tiny balcony. They connected me with a mechanic who specialized in helping veterans, getting my old truck running again at a price I could manage. They even helped me navigate the paperwork for my medical benefits, something I had always put off. It was a slow climb, but I wasn't alone anymore. My new normal wasn't just about having a roof over my head. It was about connection, about realizing that strength wasn't just in fighting alone, but in allowing others to fight alongside you. I started volunteering at the Veterans Outreach Center, just like the woman who had helped me. I listened to stories, shared my own, and helped other struggling veterans fill out forms, find resources, and simply feel heard. I even went back to the elementary school that had organized the drawing event. I spoke to the students about service, about perseverance, and about how one small act of kindness can change a person's entire world. I made sure to find the little girl who drew my picture and thanked her again, telling her how much her drawing had meant. She beamed, and in her smile I saw the future. I finally got my garden, too. On that tiny balcony, I put out a few pots and planted some basil, some tomatoes, and a small patch of wildflowers. They weren't much, but watching them grow, tending to them each morning, brought me a peace I hadn't felt in years. One sunny afternoon, as I was watering my little plants, the phone rang. It was the Veterans Outreach Center. They had a new program starting, a mentorship for younger veterans transitioning out of service. They asked if I would be willing to lead it. And then the voice on the other end chuckled softly and said, "We figured you're a hero, Sergeant Jack, and you have a lot of kindness to pay forward." It wasn't just my garden that was growing. It was hope itself.